Hey everybody, I just want to preface this video by saying that we worked really hard on this and would appreciate any feedback and ratings to help us make this series better. Basically in this video, we're going to be explaining every aspect of Ullr, how to build Ullr, what his abilities do, how to level him, who he beats in lane and conquest, pros and cons, and we're going to give him an overall rating, as well as a rating as an ADC and a hunter in Smite. The main focus is going to be Conquest, but we also mentioned builds for other game modes like Joust and Arena. We go pretty in depth, and I just wanted to preface this video by kind of explaining that. So now I'm going to start with Ullr's abilities.
Ullr's passive is Weapon Master. It's a buff to himself, and when he uses an ability in either stance, his cooldowns in the opposite stance are reduced. Now let's go to his abilities. His first ability in his bow form is called Bladed Arrow, and it's Ullr fires a bladed arrow in a line, dealing damage passing through all targets. That's pretty much just his lane clear. And his second ability, or his first ability in his axe stance, is Thrown Axe, and it's pretty much Ullr's stun. So, you know, want to throw it, stuns him. Second ability in the bow stance is Exposed Weakness, and Ullr gains a bonus physical power for 5 seconds. And in axe stance, he'll get a bonus move speed boost for 5 seconds, and that's called Invigorate. His third ability in his bow stance is Hail of Arrows, and it's just a little radius that does like a lot of damage. And the special thing about this is it has a really long range, longer than most auto attacks and abilities can go. So if somebody's trying to escape or something, you know, shoot it, and it goes over walls and stuff like that. And then in his axe stance, he has Glory Bound, and that's pretty much just a leap where he'll jump and it'll do damage when he lands in an AoE interval. And then his ult, which is pretty much just his, like, a passive, is Wield Axes and Wield Bow, where when he's in his range stance, pretty much all it does is change stances, but in his specific stance, he'll get a specific buff. So if Ullr's in his bow stance and you level up your ult, each level will give you a boost in attack speed. And if you level it when it's leveled up, in his axe stance, he'll have increased lifesteal, but only in his axe stance. Like, he won't get inherent lifesteal from his bow. And then something else to note with his two, which are his physical power and his move speed buffs. If you use one buff, if you use his two and then switch stance, you'll lose that buff. So let's say you're in your bow stance and you're fighting somebody, and you use your two, you have the physical power, and let's say they start running away. So you switch stances and you use that move speed, you no longer have that physical power buff from the bow stance. So pretty much whenever you switch stances, you lose the stance you were just in's ability. So when playing Ullr, you can level it a couple different ways, but the way I'll mostly do it is I'll level my... If you're playing in Conquest, you start at level 1, and I'll level my 3, which is a Hail of Arrows and Glory Bound. It'll just do more damage, and you can use it to clear the camps easier, or when you're approaching, when you get into lane, you can kill those melee minions to get level 2. And then after that, I'll level my Bladed Arrow, which is my 1. I'll level that max, so I can get lane clear really well. And I won't level my 2 at all until my 1 and my 3 are done, because it just, I don't really find the need for leveling my 2 that early on. I mean, sometimes it'll help. It's really just who you're going up against and personal preference. And then another way you can level his abilities is you can level his 3, which is his Hail of Arrows. You can level that over your 1, and what that'll do is it'll give you better poke against the enemy god you're laning against, and it'll just give you a lot better, it'll give you more damage, because the 3 does more damage than the 1. But the problem with that is your lane clear, so you just have to be careful and be wary of what the opponent does. Okay, So for Conquest, Joust, and Siege, I pretty much have the same build, which is the standard double crit oboe build. And if you don't know what that is, you start Bluestone Pendant and Devo Gloves. Then you'll go into Warrior Tabby or Ninja Tabby, depending on what your personal preference is. Warrior Tabby will give you more base damage, but Ninja Tabby will give you an increased attack speed if you feel like you can't hit those auto attacks or basic attacks as often as you want to. And then after Boots, then you'll go into Ichaival and Executioner. And then after that, you go into Rage, sell Bluestone for Deathbringer, and then sell Ichaival for Oboe. But what I like to do is, if you're landing against somebody who, let's say you're Uller, and you're landing against like a Freya or a Kronos, they're magical, so if you buy Ichaival, you'll still be getting some damage and penetration from it, but you won't be getting as much as if you're going up against an Apollo or like an Artemis or someone like that. So if I'm going up against a magical ADC, I'll just skip Ichaival and go straight into Executioner and then Rage, then sell Bluestone for Deathbringer, and then I'll go into Oboe. And then Arena, my build varies depending on who I'm playing up against, but it'll usually just revolve around getting Bloodforge first, then Warrior Tabby, then I get Jotuns for the extra mana and cooldown reduction, which is helpful. And after that, I'll just get Ichaival, Oboe, and Rage, because I like attack speed. In Assault, my Assault build is the same for pretty much all the Hunters, unless there's a different build I just feel like doing, and that is, I'll start Ichaival or Aussie, depending on if I have a healer or not on my team. If I do have a healer on my team, I'll get Ichaival. If I don't, I'll get Aussie. And after that, I'll go into Warrior Tabby, and then I'll get Ichaival or Aussie, depending on what I didn't get first. And then after that, it's Executioner, Bloodforge, and Oboe, or Oboe and Bloodforge. And for actives, I'll always get Greater Purification and Greater Sprint because they're really good on pretty much any hunter, and beads are pretty much necessary on any god if other team has a lot to CC. Currently in Season 2, Uller is a very strong ADC. He doesn't lose to most, if not any, matchups against other ADCs as long as you keep him even or ahead with the other hunter. And now I'll specifically go into each specific hunter. So, first up, Almuzin Cobb. And he has a strong matchup with Almuzin Cobb as long as you be careful of AMC's poke with his honey and the bees. And bees has the ability to slowly whittle down your health early game because that, alongside any minion damage you'll take, will just completely erase your health because it does a lot of damage early game. Honor, currently, right now, Honor is the strongest hunter in Season 2 because they reverted his nerf, so now his Impale, or his 2, now won't lose any damage, and previously when Season 2 started it did lose damage, but now that it doesn't, Honor is the strongest. But I don't necessarily think Uller will lose the matchup as long as you be careful of Honor's Impale into the pillar combo, and you be careful of where he places the pillar. You can't box Honor early game because of his passive, which will take away your protections, and he will just shred through you. Next up is Apollo, and in Season 2, Apollo is very weak because they nerfed the amount of damage his one So Beautiful will do. But he is still playable, and his passive and his ultimate are still very good. So when you're going up against Apollo, all you really have to worry about is his Audacity, which is his passive, and you can't really box an Apollo when he has Audacity up because it'll double his attack speed, and if he hits you with most, if not all of those Audacity shots, you will lose your health incredibly fast. Artemis is a decent counter against Uller. Her passive will give her inherent critical strike chance early game, making it incredibly hard to box her. And her cripple on her 1 will also counter Uller if he gets caught. So what I would suggest is, if you go against Artemis, just grab beads 1 pretty early. Like I would say, finish Death Gloves and then grab beads. Up next is Cupid, and Cupid, some people say Cupid is the hardest counter to Uller, and I necessarily don't agree with that because Uller and pretty much any guy going up against Cupid can easily just counter everything he has if they get Sprint 2, because Heart Bomb, which is Cupid's 1, and Fields of Love, which is his ultimate, they will slow and his ultimate will specifically cripple you, so you can't use like your 3 to escape. Like you can't use Glory Bound to get out of the radius. But if you get Sprint 2 and you're going up against Keep and he ults you, just Sprint 2 right out of the ult and you can keep firing him, because once his ult is down, you're good. Up next is Hou Yi, and Hou Yi is currently in a weird spot with not a lot of play he's getting, but there was a recent patch where they kind of buffed his one, but it wasn't really like a buff, it was kind of like a necessary adjustment, but it is kind of a buff. And I haven't really fought against many Hou Yis to test this, but I would say Hou Yi and Ullr, as long as you don't get behind, Ullr will pretty much beat Hou Yi. And all you have to do is just not miss your stuns and be careful about his ricochets. And that's that. Next up is Neith, and she's another hunter, similar to Apollo, that doesn't see a lot of competitive play. And when landing against her, all you're really going to do is just be careful and be aware of where she's putting her weaves when she backflips, and if she gets a kill or sees a kill in lane. You just gotta be careful of where those weaves are, so you can't get hit by them with like Spirit Arrow. Next is Rom, and Rom is a very good ADC, and this is because he doesn't really lose or win any matchups. Like, he won't lose any matchup, he'll go even. Like, he'll go even with pretty much any hunter. So what you need to be careful of is his 3 will cripple you if he threes you, which is his roll. If he hits you with the roll and the arrow, the astral arrow that's with him when he uses it, you are crippled for a short amount of time, and that will make you not allowed to use your 3, which could be very hard, because then he can just keep hitting you with his 1 and his 2. And also Rom's semi-global ultimate, which is he goes up in the air and he shoots those 3 shots. You gotta be careful of those, but as long as you can juke around those, you can pretty much go even and win against them. Our final hunter is Xbalanque, and Xbalanque is a very strong hunter, and he is one of the best in Season 2. He's not on her level, but I'd say he's right below on her. And similar to Ullr, Xbalanque will come alive during the mid to late game. Ullr does have a better early game than Xbalanque, but Xbalanque has a much better late game if his passives are stacked. So all you really need to take advantage of Xbalanque's poor early game. And what I mean by that is you have a better lane clear, which is your 1, and all you need to do is clear the wave, and then you can just keep poking him down while he's trying to clear your wave. But mid and late game, you have to be careful unless he's behind, because Xbalanque is very hard to come back if he's behind.
Ullr has 2 skins that aren't his default skin, and it's called Strider, which is his recolor, and the Survivor, which is his gem skin. In my opinion, Strider is pretty cool, and I like him within the default skin, but there's not a lot of differences, minus the hood color, which is kind of lame. And I don't really like the Survivor that much. It's kind of cheeseball. But I mean, a lot of people do like it. Whatever, more power to them. I mean, I guess it's kind of cool. It has some cool effects to it. As for golden and legendary skins, his golden skin is kind of ugly because the blue, like, there's too much blue, and it doesn't really fit in well, but the legendary skin looks nice because the black kind of accents the gold. And I like his diamond skin a lot because, I don't know, it looks cool.
Now we're going to talk about some pros and cons of Ullr. And one big pro is Ullr has the ability to stance switch, which no other hunter currently in Smite has. So he has 6 to 7 abilities, which are his bow, an axe, 1, 2, 3, and then his 4, which is just a buff, which I already went over. Another pro Ullr has is his 2, which will give him a physical power steroid and a movement speed steroid, as long as you don't switch stances, which I already covered in when I talked about the abilities. Another pro he has is his stun, which is axe, and his leap from his glory bound, which is his 3 in his axe stance. And one of the final pros he has is his Hail of Arrows, which I already discussed, has a very long range, which is longer than most abilities have. And the final pro of Ullr is he gains the most health per level than all other hunters in the game, and ties for getting the most mana per level with all the hunters in the game currently. The cons are Ullr's ability to stand switch and access to more abilities sometimes deplete your mana bar very fast, so all you need to do is really be aware of this when landing and try not to fight when you don't have a lot of mana. But with the introduction of Bluestone Pendant in Season 2, which will give you mana over time, you can now be not really more reckless, but you can use more mana than you previously could and still be gaining some over time. Now we're going to talk about team comp with Ullr, and Ullr doesn't really need a specific team comp to be good or to excel in, because no matter which support you give him or, you know, his other teammates, the other gods, he'll still do really good as long as you know what you're doing with him.